There are very few Western shows that were as popular in ex-Yugoslavia as Only Fools and Horses. The question is why? What made this show so special? What made it resonate with an audience on the other side of Europe? Hey, what are you doing? Oh, that's right, copyright. Huh. Instrumentals. We'll do instrumentals. Hang tight. Come on. This time next year, Rodney, we'll be millionaires. I don't think I've ever skipped this show's intro. So what is Fools and Horses? The show follows two brothers, Derek, aka Del Boy, and Rodney Trotter, who are black market dealers constantly looking for the next get-rich-quick scheme. From selling broken suitcases to barely functional cars to stolen lead. I'll start off by saying the show is kind of dark and pretty out there. Yes, of course, there's always a comedic and positive tone, but some of the topics are definitely wild for its time. In the first 4 episodes alone, we have the boys running into trannies at a club and making tranny jokes, Del Boy sleeping around with a girl Rodney is interested in, selling a barely street legal car to someone who almost gets killed driving it, and terrorist jokes. I have to remind you, this is a show from the 1980s. And although the show is clearly a comedy, it sometimes delves deeper into topics like morality, war, loyalty, family values, and so on.
My brother George was at Passchendaele. Nigh on 500,000 Allied troops died there, all for 5 miles of mud.
I think this is one of the reasons why it's so popular in ex-Yugoslavia. In the late 80s and early 90s, Yugoslavia was going through one of its bloodiest conflicts ever. Shows like Seinfeld, Full House, Frasier, and The Cosby Show depicted relative normality and focused on what I'd call first world problems. This probably didn't resonate with the Balkan audience as much as a show about 2 criminals living in an apartment complex that kind of looks like the Eastern Bloc. If you ask me to choose between a show about a psychiatrist living in a penthouse in Seattle or a show about 2 poor criminals living in South London, I know which one I'm choosing on premise alone. Now, obviously, that's not to say that the other shows weren't great too. Seinfeld to this day is still one of my favorites, but it's just not the same.
We'll take them back to the flat. Hey, that's an idea. I've got 24 litres of that Yugoslavian Riesling in the garage. We can pop old Grandpa in a meter cupboard and have ourselves a little party. Yeah.
The other big difference between this show and the other ones I just mentioned is that it's a British comedy. It's a style of comedy that resonates really well with the Balkan people. And it's not the only British show that found success in the Balkans. The desire to make fun of oneself and just brush off the ludicrous situations is something I enjoy quite a bit.
And the great thing about the British sense of comedy, it will show you as it is, but it will always say, aren't we ludicrous? Look how we carry on.
The characters of Only Fools and Horses literally live in a place that kind of looks like old Belgrade. Soviet-style, brutalist apartment buildings in a cramped flat with their grandpa. Every day starts with a hopeful idea and ends with the miserable reality that you didn't make any progress. If that's not Eastern Europe in the 90s, I don't know what is.
I was homesick, see? I missed that.
Must be joking.
It may not be much to you, Del, but to me it's got a raw and savage beauty, that.
The beauty of the show was in its brilliant writing. With a visibly low budget, most episodes took place in 2 or 3 locations. The Trotter's apartment, the local pub, and the market where the boys try to conduct their schemes.
Now just look what I bought you today, girls. Look at that. Authentic French nylon tights, all right? As worn by Sacha Distel's mum. No, seriously,
The way the showrunners stretched their budget was quite simple and clever at times. For example, this episode right here, where they need to show that the characters are going to stay in this bus well into the night. So you could set up night shots, have extensive lighting, like I have here, wait for the night, make sure other conditions are also met, no rain, no fog, or you could show a lit up bus and have the characters do voiceover with essential points to move the plot forward. Now that's thinking, Rodney.
Take them over to North London, you know, show them where Jack the Ripper was buried.
Nobody knows where Jack the Ripper was buried.
Well, they can't prove me wrong then, can they, eh?
Let's talk about the relatable cast. Del Boy is a likable but ruthless businessman who would do anything for a quick buck. He often has delusions of grandeur as he sees himself as sophisticated and a worldly man. One of his most famous traits is the constant use of French phrases to make himself, I don't know how you say this, appear more cultured, I guess. And unfortunately, these phrases are often mispronounced or completely misused.
I'll get the money off him and give it to Rodney, and it'll all be res de chasse, as they say in the Doudoine.
He's often selling things that don't work, stolen goods, and even babies. No, seriously, in one of the episodes, Del Boy is trying to be a middleman between Boise, who is another reoccurring character, which we'll talk about, and a pregnant German lady they found at the pub.
What the bloody hell's going on here, Del?
It's all right, Rodney, it's all right. Now, I was going to tell you, see, the thing is, Boise and Marlene might have Anna's baby.
What, is this a raffle?
Although Del Boy is a businessman through and through, his family is something that's even more valuable to him than money. And an episode that really hit close to home for me was season 5, episode 6, called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? It's an episode that really showed the depth and core values of Del Boy. For almost 6 seasons, we watched this character struggle to earn money with countless different schemes, often coming painfully close to something big, but never working out. And then magically, an old friend reappears and presents him with an opportunity of a lifetime.
I want you to come to Australia as my partner. Hey, I want you to front the business, Del Boy.
Del Boy, although hesitant at first, jumps on the opportunity. Shortly after, his visa gets accepted, but his brother Rodney is not as lucky. You see, Rodney actually had a bit of trouble with the law because one time he was caught smoking too many of these funny fags. No, but seriously, Rodney had a criminal record because he was smoking marijuana. Even though it was a minor thing, it barred him from being able to go to Australia. And Del Boy at first tries to convince himself that he should go without his brother, but he ultimately decides against it. And this decision comes with the realization that his ultimate dream of becoming a millionaire probably will never come true.
This time next year, eh? Huh? Yeah, well, you know, this time next year, eh?
In the late 90s, when my family was looking to leave Serbia, my father was offered a good job as a programmer in Germany. The catch was that the rest of the family couldn't go with him. These were the unfortunate times and the visa rules. My father turned down that contract because shortly after, we got a family visa for Canada. The Canadian visa, although great, came with no job prospects. It meant going there with almost nothing and starting from nothing. Mentally, this decision and this move was very difficult, and he was never able to get a job in Canada in his discipline, which he was very passionate about. He worked in menial, unfulfilling jobs until the day he retired. There are many stories in the show that revolve around economic struggles, family struggles, and tough sacrifices that probably hit close to home for many people from that part of the world.
And we're still family, Rodney. So you're going to stay in with me and Grandad and watch, you know, The Sound of Music.
Okay, I briefly mentioned Boise earlier, who is easily the most popular side character in the show. And it's worth noting that John Chalice, the actor that plays Boise, made a documentary called Boise in Belgrade. Boise in the show is a flashy, smug, and self-satisfied used car dealer who constantly boasts about his wealth and success.
Tune in, Boise.
Oh, we're just off for a couple of weeks to the Seychelles. Ever been to the Seychelles, have you?
Ever been to the Seychelles, Del Boy? Despite his arrogance, Boise's schemes often backfire, and he frequently finds himself outwitted by Del Boy. He is a hilarious and very likable character, and it's great that John made this documentary. The documentary itself has great moments, but for me, it doesn't really get to the bottom of the question it set out to answer. Why was Only Fools and Horses so popular in Serbia and the Balkans in general? The documentary serves more as a Serbia tourism video where John is introduced to Serbian culture, monuments, drinks, and more. From visiting our largest church to brandy tasting. I was really hoping it would be more of a cultural study and comparison of the show with the Balkan audience. But having said all that, it's still a decent documentary and it's worth the watch. My hope is that this video more thoroughly answers the question that John Chalice proposed in his documentary 5 years ago.
My generation and my friends, it was some kind of festivity when we look and discuss all the week until the new Fools and Horses come on our television.
Okay, let's talk about Rodney. He is the innocent, gullible, younger trotter that is constantly looking for his brother's approval. He isn't as clever as Del Boy, but he often acts as the morally conscious person in the family, making Del Boy reconsider his actions. He desperately wants to be on his own, but is unable to do so because he lacks his own wit and ingenuity. And funds, obviously. He's dependent on Del Boy for most of the series. And although this is a bit sad, it also shows the beautiful nature of their relationship, as both brothers truly need each other to survive in South London.
I got to meet that Arnie in the back of the car park there. It's nice and dark. Now, I've only just recently met the geezer, so I don't know what I'm walking into, so I would appreciate a bit of a backup.
Without a doubt, the best comedic elements of the show come from 1, the hilarious situations they find themselves in, and 2, the constant jabs they throw at each other for over 60 episodes. That's when the show is really at its best.
The good news is I'm going to stay on with Dill until he can find someone suitable to replace me.
Well, that should take him about half hour.
Let's talk about cultural impact. I was too young to fully understand this show when it came out, so I watched every episode all the way through last year. The show's impact and cultural significance is truly remarkable. In the UK, the series remains one of the most beloved sitcoms of all time, but its Balkan popularity is something that surprises most of my UK friends. I've been saying phrases like lovely jubbly for years, and I didn't even realize it came from this show. Other memorable catchphrases include,
I'm gonna kill you.
Be careful now, listen, don't be a plonker all your life.
and this one.
You know, he who dares wins. This time next year we'll be millionaires.
This one is massive and has been forever memorialized in Croatia by the HNK Rijeka supporters. And it's not the only street art about the show in the Balkans. There are several ones in Serbia too, with the most famous one being in Belgrade, where Boise was during the making of his documentary. The show is carried by clever writing and storytelling, along with intriguing and multi-dimensional characters. If you really think about it, these are two criminals. There is no other way around it. They commit crimes on a regular basis, and you root for them every single episode. You fall in love with their constant digs at each other, their family values, and their battles with the law. And speaking of the law, if you want another reason why the show is so relatable in the Balkans, just look at how the police are portrayed in the show. Oh, this one's a little tight. Okay.
I'm on the lookout for some stolen summer wear. Short sleeve shirts and blouses, men's and women's slacks, swimming trunks, bikinis.
You after promotion, Eric?
No. Me and the wife are off to Corfu next month. You're going to look at that, ain't you?
They are usually corrupt, dumb, two-faced, and often take bribes. Another problem still prevalent in the Balkans, but even more so in the 80s and 90s. And the similarities don't stop there. The boys love Jaffa cakes, there are stray dogs in the flea market where they work, they don't like gypsies, and they believe in superstitions and curses. Del Boy and Rodney Trotter are from the Republika Srpska, ak se ne varam. There's even several times where topics like mystics and psychics are explored.
No, Aubrey.
Aubrey?
Dok bude sedeo, znači ovako kako čuče, kako gurne prsti dupe, neka gleda u poster Snoopa.
And the boys drive a car that kind of reminds me of the old Yugo Fico. It's got this charm that's kind of really hard to put into words, but I feel like you know what I'm saying. They also work at a flea market, which is where I got this lovely attire, which 10 euros by the way. What a bargain. Oh yeah, this in the 80s and 90s was one of the few self-employment jobs readily available in ex-Yugoslavia. It's also one that is extremely inconsistent with very low profit margins, which is portrayed well in the show. It was a place where hustlers went to hustle.
Šta ste bili u prethodnom životu, mislim pre toga?
Pre toga radio sam na pijaci, prodavao gaće kao I svi što radimo.
Okay, there's two characters I haven't mentioned that deserve their flowers. The first one is Granddad. He is retired, he's hilarious, and he's a bit clueless. He lives in the apartment with the boys and he tries to guide them. Usually he will spend most of his time watching TV and interjecting with random, silly stories. Interestingly though, he rarely actually provides the boys with real assistance in their schemes.
Shall I give him the kiss of life?
I ain't that bad.
Leonard Pierce passed away during the production of the 4th season, but his impact on the show was immense. I think this is another often overlooked element of the show when it comes to relatability. It's also worth noting that statistically, countries in the Balkans tend to have young people live with their parents for longer periods of time on average. So most young people at that time watching the show from that region could probably relate to a grandmother or grandfather living with them in the same house. Or they were living there so long that eventually one of their parents slowly became a grandparent as another sibling had a child. It wasn't too uncommon at the time, and it still probably isn't too uncommon today. After the passing of Leonard, Albert, played by Buster Merrifield, stepped in to fill his shoes. He did not play the granddad character, but his brother. And after a series of unfortunate events, Uncle Albert has no choice but to live with the boys. I think the show does a clever job of filling his hole where others might have crumbled. This is of course due to the prolific writing of the show's creator, John Sullivan, who strived for perfection. Replacing one of the main characters in any show can be quite a difficult task. However, Uncle Albert becomes a fantastic addition to the show as he plays a retired seaman. He brought his own style of comedy and storytelling that set him apart from Granddad. One of my favorite endings in the show's history is one of the first episodes with Uncle Albert. We find out quickly that he is indeed a trotter, as the boys try to sue their local pub for not having proper safety measures when Uncle Albert takes a unfortunate tumble down the stairs. And shortly after, we learn the true nature of this show are completely separate from each other, which means you can turn on any episode and enjoy it without knowledge of prior episodes. One of my favorite things about the show is these clever and funny endings, like the one I just told you about. The show is well put together and it often ends in a hilarious way you didn't see coming. And it usually involves the boys coming ever so close to cashing in on their scheme, but ultimately failing. Take this one for example, where the boys spend half the episode trying to catch this rare butterfly that's worth 3,000 pounds. They need most of the money to pay off a debt to Denzel, who is introduced earlier in the episode. P.S. Denzel is a beloved reoccurring character that has a unique handshake with Del Boy. And as the viewer, there's this tension building and eventually a massive sigh of relief as they finally catch the butterfly, only for this to happen.
Denzel, I've got your money.
Great. See you down the pub later.
This brings me to my next point. The supporting cast is also fantastic in the show, and there's a lot of wild and wacky characters appearing for an episode or a few, and it kind of reminds me of the chaos and randomness of living in the apartment buildings in my hometown of Sremska Mitrovica. And obviously other towns and cities in Serbia are gonna have a similar feeling, so many people can relate to this, but with so many people living in such close proximity and often having nothing to do but sit outside all day, at some point, you will know your whole village and its colorful characters. The show's longevity is insane. Now, I know 64 episodes doesn't seem like a lot for a show that lasted over 20 years, but trust me, it is. Especially when considering some of these episodes were almost like full feature films lasting an hour or an hour and a half. There are 16, yes, 16 Christmas specials, which have become a beloved annual tradition in the UK. These episodes were usually significantly longer, had much grander plot lines with several twists and turns. Personally, I think John Sullivan really hit his stride in season 6. 6 of the 7 episodes from that season are top rated on IMDb, which is saying a lot for a show of this caliber. Well, Nelly, why is season 6 so special? Listen, I'll tell you. All of the episodes are now 50 minutes or longer with really flushed out stories and significant budget increases and hilarious premises. Rodney finds a posh girlfriend, the boys try to sell sex dolls. I'm sorry, but that's a crazy premise in 1989. And there's this crazy gold scam episode, which I absolutely love. And you want explosions in a sitcom? Well, here you go. Here's some explosions in a sitcom. Why? Why not? Episodes are no longer filmed in just a few locations, but a dozen. Casinos, fancy restaurants, vacation getaways, and nightclubs. But of course, it always goes back to the infamous apartment in Peckingham, where the first few seconds of the series began. Basically what I'm saying is all elements of the show were enhanced without ever losing the heart and soul of the show. There's also a massive jump in quality from season 5, which took place 3 years prior. Set design, lighting, camera quality, and broadcast quality all took a noticeable step forward. Instead of one twist at the end of the episode, how about 2? Or here, have 3. The show really peaked in my opinion. If you're a younger viewer or have never seen the show, you might be wondering, well, Nela, does this show still hold up? Is it still watchable in 2025? And as someone that recently watched every episode, it still does. Some of the references are way too British for me to understand, but it doesn't really matter because I probably wouldn't have understood them even if I was born in that era. It doesn't matter, the show's still funny. Go watch it, it's hilarious. There's also funny, outdated things like butt slaps and, I don't know, literally any technology or this hilarious medical advice.
How many cigars did that doctor say that I could have a day?
She said 3.
How many have I had?
4.
However, none of these things really matter when it comes to the enjoyability of the show because it's so well held together by likable characters, good writing, and fantastic plots. This show came out at a time where that area of the world desperately needed laughter and something to make them forget about their troubles. So along came Rodney, Del Boy, the Old Men, Boise, and the rest of the cast from a gritty side of London that wasn't really portrayed often in television. With their quick wit and dark humor, along with their strong family values and hilarious schemes. These things are really the reason why the ex-Yugoslav audience could relate to the show and laugh with them. Their quest to make a quick buck and the circumstances they lived in resonated with the Yugoslav audience like no other show. That's why the show is solidified not only in British television, but in the Balkans. So I want to thank all the people that made this show possible, and I know many have passed since the making of the show, but what you've created will live on forever, and it is truly a timeless piece of art. And if you're watching this video, I hope this time next year you're a millionaire.